Interviewers, what's the worst question someone has asked at the end of a job interview? What is the official policy regarding office romances? Not me, but my coworker, so will it be a problem if I call out a lot? I ended a college interview by asking where's the toilet? I'm going to throw up star. I'd been in a bus crash on the way to the interview and had a concussion. Got accepted. I think they liked the determination. Not as an interviewer, but the worst question I asked. My first job interview ever. It went really well. I didn't really understand how employment worked in general, and I was scared of getting locked into a multi-year contract. I'd previously been looking at the Air Force, which in my country has a minimum time commitment. At the end, I wanted to ask about this. So of course I posed it as a hypothetical: if I get the job, am I allowed to leave after a couple of weeks if I change my mind? I immediately knew how much I'd fucked up. The interviewers looked at each other and said, well, yes. Somehow I still got the job. I have no idea how. What church do you attend? It was an IT job. Seriously, I heard this one, secondhand, but immediately after, are those real, eyeing the interviewer's breasts. Answer was pause, goggle, gulp, I think we're done here. I was called in to escort the guy out. What's your employee discount? We don't have one. Shit, that's not what it said online. That's deceptive. I checked the online postings. None mentioned an employee discount. We've never had one. I've never really had a terrible question asked at the end of a job interview, as most of the time we both have an idea of whether or not they're getting a job before I let the interview end. The funniest was when an applicant who grew up in Utah asked, so is every day Hawaiian shirt day? I live in Hawaii. I was amused, but also knew it was going to be a bit of a culture shock for her. Everyone who gets their work done early gets to leave early because we all love to go surfing around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I had a guy say, if I get the job, can I have a pay advance? No, he didn't get the job. Do I need to quit my other job? She was currently applying for a full-time job, while working a full-time job. She went on to try to convince us that she's so bored at her current job she could totally get away with doing this job at the other place. Not a question, but when applying for medical school, they asked me, what would you do if your roommate had these specific symptoms? I said nothing. It's not my responsibility. I had a fight with my roommate before going for the interview. Legit, this guy asked me, what did you have for dinner last night? I responded with shepherd's pie. He said, aw banging, cheese on top? He got the job. Not mine, my friend's. Back when we were children, he had an interview to go to this private school, and the last question was, why do you want to go to this school? He sat there for a good 5 minutes looking into an empty space and then said in the end, the fields are nice. Deep down it was his parents telling him to apply, but he never wanted to. He never got in and he was thankful. He ended up going to my school. Asked about a company car and company credit card. It was a call center job. Want to go smoke a bowl now? Except it was the interviewer asking and I was the one applying for the job. Not at the end of the interview, but a question I'll definitely remember for a long time, lol. I remember one job I applied for in a nursing home. I'd worked in healthcare/social care before, and wasn't unfamiliar to that line of work. I got invited for an interview, and it was going well. Then she asked me a scenario question, paraphrasing, say one of our patients began hitting out at another patient for changing the TV without asking permission, what would you do? So I said along the lines of intervening, getting the other patient to safety / in a neutral place, calmly talking to patient 1 about how violence shouldn't be a solution, etc. The interviewer paused and said, but, what would you do? Confused, I expanded, I would seek out help from my team if need be, to control the situation. I'd notify the senior in charge, I'd acknowledge both patients and speak to them both on a level playing field without taking any sides. I'd double-check the care plans to better understand why patient 1 might have been hitting out in the first place. I'd ask my team if this kind of outburst was common and how I could prevent it in future. Again, she asked, but what would you do? At this point, I really didn't know what she was angling for, so I flat out said, I'm not sure what else you want me to say. I didn't get the job. A lady asked my boss what the dress code was. Completely normal, acceptable question. But after my boss told her it was business causal, she slams her feet on my boss's desk and says, "Good, because this is the only pair of shoes I own and I'm only going to buy shoes that look like this. If I drink," and when I said no, asked if I would blow on the interlock system to start the truck. Just a bad moment for me in an interview. When I was a teen, I applied to work at Hot Topic in the mall. I got asked why Hot Topic over Zoomies. Some store that is similar to Hot Topic, and I was just like, I've never heard of that store before. I know Hot Topic, and then I looked behind me and there was a Zoomies right behind me. To be fair, I hardly ever went to the mall. Didn't we hook up in '97? No? God, you look familiar. Turn around a sec, wanna see you from behind. The owner of the company interviewed me with HR, and the last thing he asked was if I planned on getting pregnant. I just nervously played it off and said, "Wait, people plan pregnancies?" I got the job, and of course it was toxic as fuck. As a fellow interviewee, the interviews took 3 days, so we were all staying in local accommodations. On the final day, one of the candidates went into the final interview with his suitcase and asked if they could hurry it along as he had a train to catch. I've had a "what's the worst part about working here?" Seems like a somewhat reasonable question, but it's like the reverse of "what's your biggest weakness as a candidate?" No one on the panel is going to give you a straight answer, in part because they have to turn around and still work with the other people on the panel and in the same conditions. I'll stretch this a bit because it was a sales call, not a job interview. The prospect was a German chemical company with operations in the United States. I took the top US managers to lunch to discuss the IT services that our company offered. I have a very German last name, so that came up during over lunch. One of the managers asked me why the family left Germany. I hinted at the fact that the family left Germany in 1936 because of a guy named Adolf. "Oh. I see." The chemical company ended up fronting us about $5,000 for prepaid services. In the 20 years since, they never called us once to do any actual work. So maybe they considered it some sort of reparations. For me, it was the first thing he said. "Do you guys drug test?" If you're asking, I guess that means you can't pass one. So do you? The position has been filled. This was in the 90s, and we actually didn't drug test at that time, but this guy just straight up failed the stupid test. How did I do? I've been asked this multiple times. The real answer was, you are a hard no every time. But the answer they get is normally along the lines of, "I need to talk with the other interviewers and your recruiter will reach out soon." I interviewed a gentleman older than I once who continuously asked who the boss was. I said I was the manager and left it at that. He wasn't satisfied and went on and on about what a dick the owner was. "I own the company, started it from scratch." Said the owner screwed him out of a job once, never applied before. So I was just finishing the interview out of courtesy and my own pettiness. As I asked when and where he met the owner, I see my frantic husband walk in the front door and a few employees go with him. So I'm half listening to this guy ramble on about meeting in Vegas, and so much other crap, as an employee burst into the office and says that I'm needed up front. I politely but quickly excuse myself to go out front to see my kid busted his nose bleeding everywhere. I go back in and explain I would cut the interview short and said I needed to run my child to the ER. This POS thought saying that's why women make crappy management was a smart choice. It wasn't. First off, I own this company from the idea to every last brick. I've never been to Vegas and you have never applied here. He stood dumbfounded and walked out. The next week he called asking for status of his application. "I work at a chicken plant." The guy asked, "Do y'all kill the chickens or do y'all pick up dead ones and bring them here, because I don't really condone killing." I was baffled because he literally worked at a place as a bombshell loader in the state over before moving here. I told him we do kill them, but not to worry, we pray over all the birds. He seemed content with that.